This video deals with suspense accounts. A suspense account is needed when the trial balance doesn't balance because mistakes have been made when entering the figures into the accounts. If we look at our trial balance on the left, debit side 10,440, credit side 10,300, it's out by €140. So basically a suspense account is opened up, 140 is entered, and okay, for the short term anyway, the trial balance balances. It means you can get on with creating the income statement and balance sheet. Obviously, if you go back later on and find the mistakes and correct everything. Over on the right hand side, the figures that have been changed are highlighted. Suspense account is now 0 and the trial balance balances. In order to do the suspense account, you will need to know your double entry. That is, what accounts are debited, what accounts are credited. For example, when you buy stuff, purchase goods from suppliers, you credit them with giving you those goods, and you debit the purchases account with receiving. So on down along, you do need to understand that to fully understand the suspense accounts question. Anyway, we'll move on and deal with the question. First item, you'll be told by how much the trial balance is out on what side. In this case, we're told €140 entered on the credit side of the suspense account. These are the errors and we'll deal with each of those in turn. So the first thing we'll do, quite simply, open a suspense account, opening balance 140. Okay, the first mistake. A payment for insurance entered correctly in the bank account, incorrectly in the insurance account. There should have been a debit in the insurance account of 170. There was only 50 put in, so clearly to fix that, you have to put a debit into the insurance account. In this case, you credit the suspense account. And basically, you have to describe the type of error. Was an error of commission. Okay, they entered figures, but the figures weren't right. And in this case, it does affect the trial balance. Okay. Number 2. Purchases of 350 from supplier A totally omitted from the accounts. Again, we've gone through it. Supplier A gave us the goods, credit the supplier, you credit suppliers, purchases received the goods, debit. So in this case, to do your double entry, debit the purchases, credit the supplier A. You don't put anything into the suspense account, right? You also have to describe the error. In this case, error of omission, figures left out entirely. Because figures were left out of both the debit side and the credit side, this mistake didn't affect the trial balance. And that's why it doesn't have to go into the suspense account. Anyway, we won't spend too long discussing or explaining the double entry. We'll get to this question. Third item, a receipt from customer B of 70 recorded correctly in the bank account. You should know that's a debit in the bank account. Wasn't recorded at all in customer B's account. Customer B gave us that money. To fix it, we must credit customer B with €70. We debit the suspense account. Again, what type of an error is this? Error of incomplete entry. The language might seem strange. It basically means you got some of it right, but you left some of it out. So you didn't complete the entry, the figures correctly. Again, it does affect the trial balance. So again, what do we do? Over here, we have a debit. We debit the suspense account with €70. Just to explain again, this case here, we credit customer B with 70. We debit the suspense account with 70. Okay, the key thing is the figure, and the figure of 70 goes in as a debit. This here, basically, customer B is where the other side of the 70 is. That's what you put in there. Okay, it's similar to what you do usually in your double entry. Okay, we'll push on. Right, purchase of computers 3,200. Fine. Recorded correctly in the bank, which means credit the bank by giving 3,200. incorrectly entered in the motor vehicles account. Basically, it was recorded as if we had bought cars or motor vehicles rather than buying computers. We need to correct that. We need to get it out of the motor vehicles account, credit, and we debit the computers with 3,200. It doesn't affect the trial balance. Both of them were originally debit entries in the trial balance. You're increasing one and decreasing the other. You'll see that when we go back to the trial balance at the end. And yeah, in this case, it's another funny sort of a description. It's an error of principle. You had the right idea, you put in all the correct figures, you had the correct debit and credit, but you just put it into the wrong accounts. Anyway, that's what it's called, error of principle. Now, I think it's the last one. Rent account had been overcast by 190. Again, old-fashioned language. It basically means the rent account was added up incorrectly, and it was added to be 190 more than it was. Again, you'll have to know from your double entry, rent is an expense and it's a debit entry. So in order to decrease that, you have to put 190 in the other side. This case here, 190 goes in as a credit and 190 goes in as a debit in the suspense account. So if we look over here, the key thing is our rent 190 is a debit. Again, the description here is the name of the other account. That's just the way it is. And again, what type of error was this? Again, error of commission. Okay, that's just what it's called. And it does affect the trial balance. So basically, again, very quickly, if we ran through it, you'll see suspense account 120 over here, the insurance error. Next one, the purchases and suppliers doesn't affect the suspense account at all. Next one, the receipt of 70, it does affect the suspense account because it was left out of one side. So again, you'll see a entry here of 70, debit. This one here, again, you're moving figures out of the motor vehicles into the computer's account, doesn't affect the suspense account. And the last one, again, you're decreasing your rent, it has to be a credit, corresponding debit in the suspense account in here. At this stage, if we add it up this side here, we get 260. Add up this side here, 260. So basically our balance, if we want to write it in here, balance in the suspense account is 0, right? We fixed all the errors. Right, so if we went back, and again, you don't have to do this. I mean, the trial balance doesn't form part of the question. You won't see that in the question. That's your opening trial balance. That's sort of your closing of sorts, right? You don't need to do any of this. But you'll see the items that have been affected, the purchases, mistake was there, customers, and so down along. Basically, the suspense account is now 0. The trial balance balances, and that's the intention of the suspense account. Temporarily put in a figure to deal with errors, then find out what the actual errors were, sort it out, and your suspense account goes back to being 0 again. That's it. That deals with the suspense account.